It's playoff time here on Bills by the Numbers, where we let the stats tell you where the Bills are at. As always, we're presented by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Coming up, it's a trip down memory lane as we review Bills-Dolphins playoff history and bring in former Miami left tackle Richmond Webb to lend the South Florida perspective. And we ask our one burning question for Sunday's Wild Card Showdown for the Bills and Dolphins. Let's kick it off! Happy to have you with us for the postseason on Bills by the Numbers. Bills Wall of Famer Steve Tasker, Bills insider Chris Brown with you. And with the Bills-Dolphins wild card matchup on tap this Sunday, we thought it appropriate to take a look at Bills-Dolphins playoff history. And we begin, as always, with the numbers. Buffalo and Miami have met a total of 4 times in the postseason, all of those games taking place in the 90s. Steve played in 3 of those games. Before we dive into some of those games, describe the intensity, Steve, of the rivalry then for Bills fans that aren't old enough to remember.
Here's the thing. You got to remember, and most people don't remember this. You've heard about it, but they were 0 for the 70s. The Bills never beat in a year that started with a 7, like a 1970 through 1979. The Bills never beat the Dolphins.
Right.
So Don Shula and his crew down there were, and this is, of course, included the 72 perfect season for the Dolphins, and they had some great players, and Don Shula is a Hall of Fame, most winning coach of all time. So there was a good reason for you to get
those are pretty good credentials.
Get your head caved in by those guys. But then when the 80s hit, and particularly the mid to late 80s, when Jim Kelly got signed and the 83 quarterback class came out, there started to be a rivalry there. And there was, I don't know that there was more than one, but I know there was at least only one coach in history who had a winning record against Don Shula. Marv owned him. Marv and Jim and the crew got the better of Don Shula throughout those years, and we met a ton of times, as you say, 4 times in the 90s, 3 while I was playing in the 90s in the playoffs. And of course, the division games were always huge as well.
Yeah. How were you coming here on waivers, indoctrinated to come to understand what the rivalry was? Because guys that came in the door were quickly schooled up, right?
It was a thing. I came in, I got here, we played the Pittsburgh Steelers at home. I was there one day, and we played the Steelers.
Yeah.
Then we were on the road in New England, and we played them. They beat us. Then we come back to play Miami.
Here.
Yeah. It's my first Miami game. It's my first division game. We played in New England. We came here. It's my 3rd game overall as a Bill. I'd been there roughly 2 calendar weeks. Mm-hmm. And I get out of the car over by the tunnel to go down to the thing, and it's raining, and it's a you know,
it's a lousy day.
Lousy day. And I go down and think, and I was coming from Houston, Texas, where the Oilers were. They were a bad team as well at the time. And if it rained in Houston, nobody went to the game either. And they played indoors. So I'm thinking, well, nobody's going to be at this game. I mean, we're playing the Dolphins today. Nobody's going to come to this game because we're like 2-10 on the season. And, so I'm walking down. So the early outs go out an hour before game time. You've seen it. The guys that come out.
Yeah.
Really, are the kickers, and guys come out and start throwing it around. I'm walking down the tunnel, and it's, like I said, it was like just misty rain. A horrible day. I'm walking down the tunnel an hour before game time. And the Mafia, it wasn't called the Mafia then, they were hanging over the side of the tunnel, literally slobbering, screaming at us. Get like spitting,
spewing, yeah.
Like, hey, you done it! And they were like, they were dogging Don Shula as he walks down the tunnel, dogging they hated those guys. I mean, they were absolutely sideways over this game. I was looking at him like, are you kidding me? And I asked, you go back in the locker room. I asked Ed Abramowski, the Hall of Fame trainer and bud, both those guys were around for decades. I go, what? I go, what's the deal? They're losing their minds. It's like an hour early. And they go, oh, yeah. Yeah, they don't like Miami. It's a thing. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
I guess that's it.
Yeah. And I guess for younger Bills fans, that aren't old enough to remember that, you would probably equate it to the more modern and common hatred of the Patriots because,
Absolutely.
the Patriots kind of owned the Bills for a long stretch of time there during the prime years of the Brady era. Would you say it's pretty comparable, those two? Like this stretch against the Patriots that was so bad kind of hardened
it's a little
Bills
different.
fans
It's
against
a little
them.
different because, there's always this thing about the Patriots that,
They're nefarious
yeah,
practices.
Yeah, exactly. There's like, how tough can it be when you do that, right? So the story I always tell about that my first Miami game, is I'd always, like I said, I'd been there like 12 days, 13 days.
Mm-hmm.
We'd played 2 games already, but one was on the road and one was Marv's first game. I just got in there the night before. So I'm back to open. And the story I always tell is I'm back to return the opening kickoff, and there's a guy, I'm at the scoreboard end, near side. And there's guys in the front row.
This is a good one.
The guys in the front row are like, they're looking at me like 80, Tasker, who are you?
Yeah, where'd they get you?
They go, what rock did they find? Literally, they go, what rock did they find you under? Seriously, I'm standing there, and you don't acknowledge it, but they're right there, right?
Yeah.
And I'm, so I didn't say anything about it. And so I get the opening kickoff, and I have a nice game. I return a couple of kickoffs for like 30 yards and a return. I had like 4 kickoff returns because the Dolphins are scoring.
Yeah.
And I make a couple of tackles on special teams, right? So I'm actually, for me,
it's a good day.
It's a good day. And bless their heart, I go back deep in the third quarter, return a kick, same spot. We're back in there the third quarter, and those same guys are going, Steve Areno, you are the man. We've been following you. We've been following you since Houston. You're our favorite. I'm like, okay.
I wonder how much of that commentary by the fourth quarter was
they were
affected by
well back then
certain libations.
So I do that. I return the kick, and they go, "Hey, that's so." They back then they had the big paper program.
Yeah.
So like, who is the guy? They probably went back and checked it out because you didn't have Google back then.
No.
They're like, oh, so they
all hard copy.
So they were all friendly at the end of the game.
I love that.
And I don't think we won the game, but
yeah,
I won at least 2 or 3 guys.
You won 2 fans
row.
over. Good for you, Steve Areno. The last time the Bills and Dolphins tangled in the postseason was January 1999. Buffalo had rebounded from an 0-4 start to make the playoffs under first-year head coach Wade Phillips with a 10-6 record. Doug Flutie was named NFL Comeback Player of the Year after taking over for an injured Rob Johnson. Miami was the other wild card at 10-6. I totally forgot this, Steve, that the Jets won the division under Bill Parcells that season at 12-4. But the Dolphins got home field on tiebreaker with the Bills. So on the first play from scrimmage, Flutie goes deep to Eric Moulds. He goes 65 yards, and he's headed to the end zone.
Yeah.
And then he fumbles the ball when Terrell Buckley knocks it loose and Miami recovers. The game tight throughout 3 quarters, and Moulds tied the game at 14 with a 32-yard touchdown catch. But Miami scores 10 straight points in the fourth quarter. They go up 24-14 with 3 minutes left. Flutie and Reed would both lose fumbles in the second half to make it 3 turnovers in the game. Bills still had a chance to tie or win at the end, down 24-17, 17 seconds left. Buffalo first and goal at the Miami 5, but Flutie sacked by Trace Armstrong. He fumbles. Miami recovers to seal the game. 4 total turnovers ultimately sunk the Bills. And then we remember Jimmy Johnson in the locker room dancing on a box of Flutie Flakes, thinking he was hilarious, which still ticks me off to this day. I can't look at him right. I mean, it's bad enough the 2 Cowboys Super Bowls with Jimmy, like, with his hair and laughing and all that stuff. But the Flutie Flakes thing, was the capper for me. Anything that sticks out to you about that game?
The thing that sticks out about me is the sack at the end with Trace Armstrong. Yeah. That's the one that got me.
He got him good. He came clean.
He hit him hard right from behind. And the 3 fourth-quarter turnovers were crushers. You're just not going to win that. As you think about the games we've seen this year with the Bills, teams have turned it over. Mac Jones most recently. So that's what sticks. And plus, Eric had a dynamic. He was unbelievable in that
240 game. Receiving yards on 9 receptions.
Yeah, and
240 on 9.
And he fumbled that one away, or that would have been.
He would have had over 300.
Yes, exactly.
In that game.
He
still
was
a record.
Absolutely dominant, and that was that was like his 3rd year, I think. Yeah, I think it was his 3rd year.
That was his breakout year.
And he just exploded onto the scene. truly a Hall of Fame caliber player who got stuck in the mediocrity of the franchise while he was there. But he was, he had Doug Flutie, he had Rob John, then and then
that went
the
back and forth for 3 years.
The trail of tears that followed that at that position. So, yeah, that's what I remember about that.
Oh my God. The Trail of Tears. You are bringing out the bouquets today. I remember Moulds was dominant that entire season. And Flutie's like, this guy can't be stopped. I'm throwing it to him every chance I get. And he did that year. I still remember in that training camp at Fredonia, Moulds comes in, third year. He had done 0 in 96 and 97. Thurman got in his ear after the 97 season, coming in 98. He says, hey, man, we need you to do more. Step it up.
Yeah, and he did.
That I still, to this day, I've covered 20-something training camps. I have not seen one player dominate a training camp every single day the way Moulds dominated that 98 training camp at Fredonia. It was insane. He'd score like 3 touchdowns every day. And I'm talking like 60-yard plays, 40-yard plays, like every single day.
He was monstrous.
Unbelievable.
Absolutely monstrous.
We spin it back next to 1995 to Rich Stadium in Orchard Park, December 30th, 1995. The Bills are AFC East champs. They have to square off with one of the 2 wild cards in the division, Miami. Indianapolis was the other that year. Bills sprint out to a 27-0 lead, which included a 37-yard touchdown pass from Jim Kelly to Steve Tasker, and Miami never recovered. It got as bad as 34-7. Before the Dolphins made the game look a little bit closer. Final was 37-22. You guys looked like an avalanche in that game, and Miami just got buried. What led to the outburst right from the jump, do you think? Like, what was it?
I'm not sure. I think Thurman made a one-handed catch over his back in one of these games. I think this might have been it. Right out of the gate, Thurman made a great catch on the first third down, kept us on the field, and we just kind of gained momentum from there. And then I was actually playing at the end because I don't think Andre was playing at this point.
I think Bill Brooks missed this game.
Yeah, maybe. We had some injuries in that, and which is why I was on the field. And Jim and I had a chemistry, and he had felt fine about throwing it to me. When I got back on the field, I remember saying, "Hey, listen, they've got a safety on me, and we get into
Stewart,
this,
I think
we get into this situation, this down and distance, or when they get this coverage and the safety comes out on me, he can't cover me."
Yeah.
And all right, so next thing I know, it was like you say, a 37-yard or 30 whatever it was yard touchdown.
37-yard touchdown.
And one thing that sticks out about me about that game was it was Don Shula's last game as head coach. That was the end of an era, and that's what I remember most about that game. Really, I'd forgotten I had a good game.
5 for 104 or something. I think you went over 100 in that thing. So that
was in the first half too. I think.
Yeah,
I didn't
just
play
can't.
In the second half. I got hurt.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. Pulled a muscle.
Oh my!
Pulled a 10, and then I had to get shot up the next week from Pittsburgh when we lost.
Yeah, that was the flu game for Bruce. He missed that game.
That's right.
That was the flu game.
We still talk to him about that.
Yeah. I remember that one pretty well. I was living here, but I wasn't covering the team full time at that point in time. I was just a part-time dude. I just was shocked at how you guys just put them in your rearview mirror at the end of the game.
It happened really fast.
27-0, and then it's 34-7. I mean, the game was over early. It was shocking because Miami had a decent team. I mean, they weren't slouches by any stretch. Biggest playoff game of all between these two teams took place on January 17th, 1993. We'll be 2 days off of that on Sunday, incidentally, when the two teams met in the AFC title game in Miami at Joe Robbie Stadium. An early 3-3 tie busted up by a 23-0 run by the Bills. Another runoff of unanswered points. Buffalo's defense put Dan Marino and company on lockdown. Phil Hansen, Clifford Hicks had interceptions. Miami was 3 for 12 on third down in that game. Thurman Thomas, Kenny Davis had the only touchdowns for Buffalo, and Steve Christie, 5 field goals as the Bills advanced to their third consecutive Super Bowl. Thoughts on that one, Steve? What flashes in your head for that?
We couldn't get in the end zone to begin with, but we kept getting turnovers. Phil Hansen's tip pass interception got us down close. I don't even know that I think we scored on a counter play to Thurman came down. So we scored one, but then we started piling field goals on. And that was one as well where Kenny Davis snapped off a big long run late in that game to put it away. And ended up on the cover of Sports Illustrated because of it. It was the one where, like, here they come again. It's like the fourth straight Super Bowl, and people were absolutely ready to puke with us getting back.
I think that was the third one.
Was it the third one?
I think that was I think it was. I'm pretty sure.
So it was. People were like going, seriously?
Like and the Bills again?
Right. Yeah. And our offensive staff there, Thurman had a nice couple of runs. We had a nice wrinkle on our run game that put Thurman in the end zone once. They did a nice screen pass. We had a screen game. You know, I got a hand on the punt on one of Reggie Roby's punts. Deflected it. It didn't count as a block because it went past the line of scrimmage, but you know, it really seemed like we had some momentum in that game from start to finish. And I remember thinking this. The vibe about the Dolphins was that they had always come to Buffalo for the playoffs. They'd always struggled late in the year.
Now this time it was going to be different
Now it's almost like we're entitled to this game because it's here. And that entitlement took the edge off them.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah. Yeah, I really thought like they said, okay, now it's our turn to go. And here we're going to – and because Dan Marino and those guys, they'd been to the Super Bowl. It was like, all right, we've been waiting for this long. We're going to go now. It's our turn. So let's have this game happen so we can go. And, they just didn't come in with the right edge.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it kind of goes back to what you say all the time. You got to play your best on that day, and if you don't,
and unfortunately for the teams I was on, we always played well on championship day. We didn't play well in the Super Bowl.
Yeah. The only playoff game between the Bills and Dolphins that had some snow, not a lot. January 12th, 1990, Bills had the bye while the Dolphins beat the Chiefs 17-16 in the wild card round to face Buffalo in Orchard Park. Bills again jump out to an early lead, up 20-3 early in the second quarter, but the Dolphins closed to within 3 points a minute into the fourth quarter. It was suddenly 30-27, but 2 touchdown drives in 36 seconds of game clock by the Bills suddenly made it 44-27 midway through the fourth, and the game was done. First, Steve, were you surprised they were able to climb back into the game? And then do you remember the talk on the sidelines, when they made it a 3-point game?
Nothing like I don't remember thinking about being surprised by it.
Okay.
Because
Dan could put up points,
Dan could throw it up. But the 36 seconds, I can't remember how they really happened. I think the game ended up 44-34 in that game.
Yes.
And so they got one more touch. I mean, they got another touchdown. They scored 34 points on us.
Right.
I do not remember scoring 2 touchdown drives in 36 seconds.
Yeah, I was looking at the game book before, we sat down to do the pod, and I don't have the game book in front of me, but essentially they scored, and then you guys got a turnover, and you scored, like, in 3 plays.
Yeah.
Like, one drive was 2 plays, the other drive was 3 plays. It was insane.
Yeah, that's the way it happens.
That's the way it was
that's
in
the way
1990.
Yeah.
It was quick with you guys. But.
Well, yeah, and we were running a play every 16 seconds,
Yeah, that's what I mean.
And that's not game clock. That's real time.
Yeah.
Whether the clock was stopped or not, it was 16 seconds and this ball was snapped. And it works as long as you can get first downs.
Yeah, it worked pretty well. Pretty cool to relive some of those games. The Bills-Dolphins playoff history continues now in the numbers game, where we will quiz Steve on some facts from Bills-Dolphins playoff matchups. Steve, are you ready?
Okay, let's go.
All right, here we go. Question number 1. The Bills went 3-1 in their 4 playoff meetings with the Dolphins. How many times were they first on the scoreboard in those games? Scored first.
I'll say
in those 4 meetings.
I'll say 2 of the 4.
Actually, 3 of the 4.
Oh, really?
3 of the 4. I mean, I was hoping you'd use the test to take the test. I kind of told you you sprinted out to a couple of leads.
Right,
there.
I knew that.
You knew there were at least 2.
Yeah.
All right, not bad. We'll go to question number 2. What Bills player racked up the most points against the Dolphins in their playoff history? Non-kicker.
Oh, non-kicker.
Non-kicker.
Does Kelly count as throwing touchdowns? Or
no?
I'll say Thurman.
It is Thurman Thomas. 30 points.
Oh. No wonder they signed him at the end of his career, man. They needed him.
He was a Dolphins
Yeah,
killer.
He was
They
a crusher,
hated
man.
him.
He was like Josh Allen before Josh Allen.
Yeah. All right, question number 3. What player in this 4-game playoff history had the exact same name of a famous NBA player? I don't believe you played against him, so this would be later in the playoff
99.
history. Yeah.
Is there Michael Jordan?
I'll give you a position.
All right.
He played running back for the Dolphins. But he has the exact same name of a famous NBA player.
You got me.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that guy.
The running back, yeah.
I
He didn't
forgot about
spell
that.
Kareem the same way. Kareem, the NBA player, spells it with 2 E's.
I forgot all about him.
You remember that guy?
Yeah, I
Kareem
do,
Abdul-Jabbar.
yeah.
I always
Oh, my
thought that
gosh.
was... I felt bad for the kid. Like, your parents seriously named you after... All right, I don't know.
After a
That's hard to live
7-footer?
up to.
Yeah, that's hard.
I mean, even if you're playing a different sport. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Question 4. Can you, Steve, name all 4 kickers who kicked in the Bills-Dolphins playoff history? Who participated in those 4 playoff games for the Bills and Dolphins, respectively?
Steve Christie, Scott Norwood.
Right? Those were the easy ones.
Pete Stoyanovich.
Yep, you're 3 for 3.
And
Can he get the last one?
I was going to say Raul Alegre, but it's
it's
not,
not
Raul.
Raul
Who is it?
Alegre.
Who's the other Dolphins kicker?
I will tell you, you are on the right track because it is.
Yeah,
this
I know.
kicker is of
I know.
Hispanic descent.
I know. I don't know. I can't. I'll never get him. What is it? Who is it?
Olindo Mare. Yes, that was the 4th kicker. Question 5.
Gosh, darn it. All right, go ahead.
Which team threw more interceptions over the life of that 4-game playoff series, Buffalo or Miami?
Got to be Miami.
It is Miami, but it's close. It's by a count of 8-6. A lot of turnovers in those games.
Dude, that was a freewheeling game back then, man. A lot of tipped
turnovers.
interceptions. Hansen had a tipped interception in the championship game.
Right. Clifford Hicks, as we mentioned.
Clifford Hicks. Yeah, there was some. Those games were absolutely
David White,
wild.
didn't he have? Did he have? Was that a playoff game when
don't know
David
if it
White,
was.
or was
I
that
don't
to
know if it
clinch
was
the
or not.
division?
It might have been because that.
That clinched the division. Then you played in the very
gotta
next
tell
week
you,
in
man,
'95.
Jim and Dan were just massive presences in the league. I mean, they were just, Jim was this tough, hard-nosed, big gun, let's go fast, and we're going to throw it all over the yard kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
And Marino was like, I don't care, let's go. He refused to hand it off, which is one of the things that caused him problems.
Probably.
Danny was, listen, I'm going to.
They were too one-dimensional.
I got this. They'd have a 1st and 10. They'd hand it off 2nd and 3. And they wouldn't hand it off again. Dan said, I got this. I'll get this first down. I was like, dude, we were like going, oh, man, what are we going to do? We can't stop their run. Oh, it's like, it doesn't matter. They're not going to run it.
Yeah.
So
Certainly not enough.
yeah, and so that was one of the things about them. That you get in there, and it was like Jim and Dan were just, it was just them.
Yeah, it was
like
shootout.
all of us were just, we were window dressing. They were going at it. It was fun. It
Yeah.
was fun.
Good times for sure. All right, Steve, nice job in the numbers game. We now turn to our guest this week. It's a man who played in all 4 of the Bills-Dolphins playoff games. It's current Believe in Dolphins podcast host and former Miami left tackle, 7-time Pro Bowler, 2-time All-Pro, Richmond Webb joining us. Richmond, good to have you. We're trying to do a little playoff history here, with this being the 5th playoff meeting between the Bills and Dolphins, and I know it's not a great history for you, although the last one you played in finished the right way in '99. But I'm curious for the South Florida perspective from you, because the Bills fans had developed this deep-seated hatred for the Dolphins, having never beaten them through the course of the 70s, and that carried into the 80s and 90s. That hatred still existed. And then, Dan Marino and Jim Kelly took it to a whole nother level, with the shootouts that those guys engaged in. What was the approach that Shula had you guys take facing a very familiar opponent that you had already played 2 times during the regular season.
Well, I think the approach was, and it was probably the same approach that Coach Marv Levy had. Was the thing that we focused on at the beginning of the season was first thing was to win your division, and back then Buffalo was the team to beat or go through, and it was proven because when I first got in the league, they went to the Super Bowl 4 years in a row consecutively, and that's I don't think people really realize how hard it is to do that for 4 years consecutive in a row. So it just speaks volume to the type of players they had, the competitiveness, and they were able to get things done, and they were just a little bit better than us, and that's why a lot of times we fell short. But we didn't like them, but we had to respect them because they had some really good football teams back then.
And it comes to this too. I remember, and you guys, particularly down in the trenches, the offensive and defensive line, you guys lean on each other and bang into each other all day, and you're never more than 3 feet away from each other. It almost becomes this intimate relationship over the course of 3 hours, and then to do it for 3 games in the same season, man, it's really got to be a different dynamic down inside.
No question. And then it was, majority of the time, I think one time, but early on, we always had to come back to Buffalo
Yeah.
to play, and playing in it was Rich Stadium. I don't know what it's called now, but I still call it Rich Stadium. But just the way the fans and the crowd noise, and if the offense would make plays, and you start hearing that song "Let's Go Buffalo," and I was like, man, it could turn into being a long day. But I always look forward to playing against the Bills and Snap, but just some really great teams. We just kind of came up short in the 90s.
You had the unenviable task of going up against Bruce. And I think you won your share of battles over the years against him. I mean, you're a 7-time Pro Bowler for a reason, 2-time All Pro. So I always kind of felt you held your own in a lot of those games. But what was that like, kind of dovetailing off of what Steve was asking, in terms of the relationship and the respect you guys had for one another?
Oh, no question. That was the toughest guy I had to play against throughout my whole career. I tell people that all the time. So anytime you playing against Bruce, you just get ready for 60 minutes of hell. Doesn't matter whether it's a run play, pass play. He's giving 100%, and he was just a great player. Pass rush. You couldn't cut him off. Even trying to go play side, it was just a struggle. So mentally, you just had to get prepared for that. And I think sometimes if you stalemate, you consider that a win. But he was just such a great player. He's got the sack record. I mean, the statistics speak for itself. And but it was always a measuring stick for me that if you can kind of compete with this guy here, you got to be doing pretty good. So tremendous respect for him. But yeah, he was the toughest guy I had to play against.
And back in the day, the two guys that, and we always know, everything centers around the quarterbacks. You had Dan and Jim going at it, and the Bills ran that offense that was fast, and the K gun going really fast, really fast, really fast. And Dan didn't care, and no matter what the situation, he was not afraid to drop back and sling it. What was the perception about your offense against the Bills' offense? Those two dynamics about how the Bills ran their stuff, and Dan and all you guys ran your stuff.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference was I think y'all had a better defense at the time than we did. Offensively, we could keep up with you guys, but it seemed like we would have to end up selling for a field goal instead of a touchdown, and so we would get behind just a little bit. But like you said, Steve Tasker, Andre Reed, Thurman Thomas, Jim Kelly, Lofton. I mean, he could just pick his spots, and then Thurman was the guy that he could dump it off, and he make a 3 yard run, turn into 30 yards down the field, and it was just frustrating. It was always he had another option, no matter who he chose to go through, and but we would battle. We had Duper Clayton, Keith Jackson. We would go back and forth, but it seemed like we would always be able to not. They would always be able to kind of stop us where we'd have to settle for a field goal, and then we try to keep it close, but most of the time we lose by a touchdown or so. But I always enjoy playing against the Bills.
Yeah, I mean, Richmond, you guys finally got them in your building for that AFC title game, 92 season.
Yeah.
Did I'm just curious what the mental mindset was going into that one, because finally you had the Bills in your place in a big playoff game. Like, did you guys just go into that game just like any other playoff game, or was it different because you finally felt like we had the Bills in our house now?
I felt good going into that game. I felt that, we possibly, with us being at home instead of having to go to Buffalo, um, that we would have a chance to win. I mean, we had home field throughout the playoffs, and Bills went in as a wild card team, but they're still the Buffalo Bills, and they've went the previous 2 seasons. So you take all that into account, but at the end of the day, they were able to make the plays to get it done, to get back in there, and that was frustrating for me. I mean, that was the closest I got to ever, making it to a Super Bowl. So you get to the title game, that's what you want, but you figure if you're at home, you want to try to pull that game out, but we wouldn't. And so, you still shake hands and you respect those guys because they got it done. And that's why I say when you look at it, if you go back and look at it, what they were able to accomplish was they one of the greatest teams ever assembled, to be able to go to 4 Super Bowls in a row. People just don't. I don't know if they really truly appreciate what they've done. Whether you're a Bills fan or not, you got to take that into consideration. And when you look at the players, this most of the time they talk about the offense, but like Cornelius Bennett and Bryce Pop and Henry Jones and those guys that were on the defense, their defense was just as good as well. So um, I know because I played against them all the time, and I knew the character of those guys and the talent they had on their team. So I got a tremendous respect for those guys back then.
Let's talk. Can we talk a little bit about this matchup coming up? I mean, a lot of it depends on Tua and if he's going to be available and how well he can play after sitting down for so long. What is the vibe of, about this game down there, and what's going to and what the Dolphins are going to have to do to beat the Bills up here?
Well, I think the thing, like you said, I think that is key is whether Tua will be able to play. I think the last time we played the Bills a few weeks ago, we matched up pretty well against them, but the Bills were able to pull it out. But not only Tua, but we got injuries in the offensive line, secondary, this and that. So it just depends on how healthy we are going into this game. And I always look at the fact of glad the young man Damar Hamlin is back and he's back in Buffalo, this and that. I think not only you have to be a Bills fan, but just being a former NFL player, it's a brotherhood. So to see him continue to make progress, especially what we saw on the field that night against Cincinnati, to see him recovering and responding and doing that, um, you got to take that into consideration. That I'm sure his teammates is going to rally around that bet. But for the Dolphins, we got to have as many healthy people as possible because we know we're going into a hostile environment and it's going to be a game with a lot of emotion, stuff like that. But I think the key is if we got players like Tua and stuff that can play, I believe it can be a competitive game. We'll have a chance to win it. But I just don't know now because the injury report, they hadn't updated whether he's going to be there or not. So we just have to wait and see.
Richmond, I'm going to try to end this one on a high note for you. The last time you got the Bills in the playoffs, you got the best of them in '99 down at your place, wild card game. I know Eric Moulds was going off in that game, but besides that, your defense came to play. They forced 4 turnovers, and, you finally get the Bills. You get the best of the Bills in the playoffs. How satisfying was it for you knowing, this was your 4th kick at the cat, and you finally got them? And then there's Jimmy Johnson in the locker room, waving around a box of Flutie Flakes all over the locker room. How the heck did that happen at the end of the game?
I don't know, but the way I truly approach the playoffs. Like I say, Bills has been a consistent competitive opponent since I was in the league. But it was good to get that win. But the way I look at it is once the playoffs start, it's a week by week. So it was good to get that win, but then you got somebody the next week and the next week, and you want to continue. But it's like a hurdle you cross when a team is beaten that many times in the playoffs, and you actually get across that hurdle. It is a sense of accomplishment. But yeah, you just got to take it week by week and all that. But it was good to finally get that one late in my career because they thumped our heads pretty good early on in my career.
So what did Jimmy do in the locker room, man? What was the locker room speech afterwards like before he started going nuts with the cereal box?
I can't remember the speech, but it was always, when he was at the Cowboys, you used to hear him say, "How about them Cowboys?" But
Yeah.
like at a big win like that, he would come in and say, "How about those Dolphins?" and this and that. And it was the playoffs. You make it in there and you get a win. It's at home, this and that. So everybody was excited. But yeah, I remember playing against Flutie as well. I mean, he wasn't that tall, but he could throw the ball and then he could scramble and hurt you with his legs and stuff. So he had beaten us at times too. So yeah, I remember Doug Flutie as well. He was a great player.
Richmond, thanks for being with us, man. It's good to see you again, and good luck. And also, of course, happy birthday today.
Hey, thanks, Steve. Hey, thanks for having me on the show, and good luck. And we'll mix it up on Sunday? So
Sunday, yeah.
Right.
Thanks,
All right.
Richmond. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
The NFL playoffs are getting underway, and you can win up to $1 million with FanDuel's free pick'em style game. High-low. Pick teams from 4 different stat categories. The more you get right, the more you can win, and your odds are better now with a smaller playoff field. Get them all right, you could win up to $1 million. Just go to FanDuel.com, select high-low under their free-to-play section. FanDuel, an official partner of the Buffalo Bills. Steve, you've got the high for points this week. Kick us off.
All right, high for points. Your Buffalo Bills.
Woo!
I'm going with them. They put up 32 points against the Dolphins last time out. I expect them to spread out Miami, throw the thing all over the yard. It looks like it's going to be pretty good weather. The sun might even come out. So I'm taking Buffalo high for points. So low for points, the Baltimore Ravens. Lamar's probably not going to play. Even if he does, he's going to get rusty. Mark Andrews is their only reliable weapon as a tight end. I think Baltimore is gonna have to keep this low on the scoreboard.
I get a feeling it's going to be a struggle for them, too. High for passing yards. I am taking the Los Angeles Chargers. I think they're going to be throwing the ball all over the place against the Jags. They rely heavily on Justin Herbert's arm to carry them offensively, and I think he can produce, even though Jacksonville's pass rush is pretty good. Low for passing yards. I'm following your lead, Steve. I'm taking the Ravens. I just think it's going to be a struggle for them in Cincinnati, much like the tail end of the regular season. So I will take Baltimore low for passing yards there.
All right, high for receiving yards by an individual player. Receiving yards, I'm going to take Minnesota's Justin Jefferson. He had 12 for 133 and a TD in the regular season meeting with the Giants. I think he's going to do it again. He's the guy, and I think when you get to these spots, your big guns have to show up, and I think the Vikings are going to load that guy up on opportunities. Low for receiving yards, I've got San Francisco's Brandon Ayuk. He's not the first option in the passing game. In fact, he's probably third at best. Even though San Francisco's got a nice offense, I just don't see him going off in the playoffs. So it's Brandon Ayuk for low in receiving yards.
Okay, high for rushing yards. I'm taking the Giants' Saquon Barkley. The offense goes through him, and I don't think that changes here in the postseason. Barkley will get touches, and Minnesota's run defense finished 20th in the league this year. Yeah. Low for rushing yards. I'm going with Seattle's Kenneth Walker. I mean, he's had a nice season, but that San Francisco defense is a bear, man. Right. I don't see Walker finding many holes in that game. Niners are the best run defense in the league. I expect them to bottle up Walker and the Seahawks. We turn now to the 5th encounter in the postseason between the Bills and Dolphins this Sunday with our one burning question. Steve talks about it all the time on our daily show, One Bills Live. What, Steve, do you believe is the hardest part about playing a team a third time in one season?
It's really strange as a player because you go out there and it really seems familiar to see these guys across from you. You've played them twice. You get an idea of what their capabilities are. And there's some uncertainty about, because you know they're going to be a different scheme. They're going to be playing a different coverage, a different technique. They're going to be doing different things against you, both offensively and defensively. It's going to be you're always apprehensive about that. And I think the key thing is that you got to do what you do with a lot of confidence. I think that's where it falls. You got to play your game. Go.
Even though you know they're familiar with you, you got to believe in your stuff and that you're going to be able to execute.
Do what you do. Get the matchups you want. Everybody keeps their focus very narrow on your job and doing what you're supposed to do and being ready at all times. I think the preparation is key. You can feel it in the building when you get into the playoffs. Everybody's real focused. Everybody's like, yeah, and the extra details are discussed at a little greater length. Practice starts earlier because everybody's out there quicker.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. Just little small things like that let you know, and in meetings, the language and the attitude and the questions, everything's turned up. It's hard to beat a team 3 times in a season.
Yeah.
So I think it serves both teams well that they've split. They've both got some confidence coming in that, hey, if we do things right, we got these guys. So these games, and these wild card weekend games, I've always said I think they're the best football of the year because both teams claw and scratch and fight to get in, and that kind of carries into this first week of the playoffs, and they really, really turn it up.
And it's win or go home, so
That's
you
right.
really do let it all hang out.
Yeah.
I mean, it is great football. There's no question about it. That's why they call it Super Wild Card Weekend. Our closing figure deals appropriately with Bills-Dolphins playoff history. Sunday's matchup is the first in the postseason, as we've told you, since January 1999 between Buffalo and Miami. 6 current Bills players weren't even born the last time the Bills and Dolphins played one another in the postseason 23 years ago. Talk about feeling old. Jeez, That'll do it for this edition of Bills by the Numbers. Make sure to subscribe on your podcast platform so you know when the next episode drops. And remember, when you need to know about the Bills, you need to check Bills by the Numbers. For Steve Tasker, I'm Chris Brown. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next week, everybody.